Alright, hello everybody and welcome to day 16, second to last day of the stream. Well, for the pilot season at least. I'll be leaving for Seagrove in a few days. There will be a break, I don't know, I guess it's going to be like a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks break before the next season if we're doing one. and I don't know, I reckon Seagrove will determine whether I do another one or not, but I feel like there's gonna be at least another season because there's stuff that regardless of what happens I want to do. So, Jordy's playing Final Fantasy 14 right now. Yeah, probably. Sorry. All right, let's start on these. Now, for those following the stream, for those actually following the stream live, you will know that we did do day 16 last Sunday, and it's not like it was useless, but I basically ended up chasing my tail on something because the printing of some numbers was deferred, so I could basically not debug myself out of what was just a silly design mistake. And in the end, I don't think it was very useful. I mean, could have been, but it seems that for the general audience that consumes these on YouTube, it would have been more confusing than anything. So I have elected to not publish that one, and we're gonna redo it. And we are gonna finish the callbacks. Obviously, as soon as I finish the stream, I actually had a look at it, peace and quiet, and it was within 5 minutes. It was obvious what was going on, and it was obvious what the bug was with the actual defer evaluation. So, what we want to do is finish callbacks, and to recap a bit, what we're left with right now is that we have a working IKFK, and that's all dandy, that works. So we have two different controls, and what happens when you switch from one to the other is, it's all fine and all of that. But there's several cases, and this goes back to what will be the have fun waiting for a tipo. Yeah, I don't do that. I don't do the tipo queue. So what we are left with that we need to fix, well, two things that we want to do, maybe we'll get around both today, is one, making sure that the callbacks are available when the scene opens, and the other is making sure that they work in all situations. So right now we have this FKIK switch, and we do have, in a way, a problem with the way the evaluation of the graph works compared to what the UI does. So let's rearrange these the slightest bit. Now, sure. So this is just a throwaway graph tab to see what we're doing. And these are the settings that we're using. And what has happened since I have done, I did it actually before the previous unpublished stream, but there's a couple of things that were changed basically, and it's just literally just adding and taking away ports and the names of these things. So compared to before, I've decided to streamline a few things. So right now we are literally looking straight up only at what we want to blend. And that is, we know that we want for the FK, we can pretty much get just the rotation straight up as a single value. So, and that comes from here, and that should be a single angular value. There is something we're already accounting for, which is in the case of the IK, we're going clockwise, so that needs to be negated, and it's done in the blend node, but we did account for that in the script. The other part we're interested in is the IK rotation, which is going to come from here, and that's actually a triplet of values, but we're only interested in, again, in a subset of it, because all we care about is the one angle that we're going to work with. and with the scaling and all of the UI, so we should only get the rotate X from that, I believe, but we'll get to that, and that was also taken care of. But before we were actually getting the objects and fetching the values, it was a little bit more complicated than it needed to be. Now, the IK control translate is what we do some derivative work from, but not super important, I guess. This is just an option. Pedals gravity line is not something we're interested in. Root to end switch, not something we're interested in, not for the FKIK switch. And I have added these dirty trackers. So we've not done graph theory, we've not done anything about how Maya evaluates the graph, but it's probably worth, and I'm not going to do it now because that's probably a couple streams worth of work and so on. It's something I'd like to actually start season 1 with. But there is something that we need to talk about real quick in those regards, which is what we have now is a control panel basically, and we did talk about events and the loops that Maya goes through that you can get stuff from and all of that. And we have an actual switch parameter, right? And that one goes out to a couple of nodes, and those are going to be the IK and the FK. So sort of a pseudo graph, I guess, here. Then those actually go into a blend, and then those are well, that one value is the actual value that sorts an effect. So what we were doing with the callback, which worked perfectly fine once applied if we hard switch the value. Alright, I need to switch the mouse every time I want to navigate. So if we actually punch these in like that, the callback as we had it works just fine. But let's actually go through that. In the case where you use virtue sliders, so if you middle click, and the mouse cursor might be super tiny, but just try it at home. If you middle click in the viewport and you slowly move that, then what's gonna happen is that the polling rate, the sampling rate of the mouse is much more frequent, and it will update this attribute much more frequently than the hard switch from 0 to 1, and that's where we have to deal with the way Maya is doing that, which for the record is nothing particularly bad. I mean, it's just the way you do interactions in many regards. And that is the fact that these switch will actually send out many in the UI domain. Let's change color. Let's be fancy. So if we are in the UI domain, if you hard switch it, if you punch in 0 or 1, what you happen is you get 0 and then you get 1. So that's a pretty sharp change in value, and it will look something like that. Or if you're going the other way around, it will look something like that. Now, if you're using the mouse and you drag the mouse in the viewport with a virtual slider, what happens is that the sampling rate of the mouse or the sampling rate of the UI, whichever it is going to be that's affecting us, is actually going to be much more frequent than just a hard switch. So what you get if you're switching from 0 to 1 is probably going to be a lot of zeros, and then finally it goes to 1. So we have a problem in a way that our interaction curve and the amount of times and the frequency with which the callback gets fired is, if we're going from here to here, it's gonna look, it's not really a change in value that looks like that, but it doesn't have the sharp transition that's past the midpoint. It's actually gonna be something that halfway through our manipulation changes, and for many times it's going to be fired off with the same value. So what we were doing by evaluating the switch value and making a decision based on that, by looking at the provenance of the value, which is what we need to do because we want to match where we come from. So the idea of this callback is that If we are, where are we at right now? We're in FK, we switch to IK, we want the IK to go there. So the problem with that is that the way we've engineered it is that we're basically going to get many calls saying something has changed because the callback is fired, and all we know is that it has fired. Something has changed, and it's changed to, and it's changed to the same value that was there before. So you get some false positives where the callback, you're in FK and it will treat it like you're switching to FK, so it will actually match the FK to the IK and then relinquish control of this component to the IK, but you want it the other way around. So a couple ways we can do it, and hopefully super quick tangent on what the graph will do. It's one of the things I think I suggested it in the post, and it is a valid way to solve it, is you could actually, instead of looking just at the value of the switch, which is like its instantaneous change and the rate of change are not interesting, and remember that we're working with the callback, so we don't really know where we're coming from or where we're going to. What we want to know is, has there been change? What we want to know is if this has happened. Has there been a sharp change in the actual signal, not the signal comes from and goes to. So something that I did suggest, which is valid for the record, is if you look at the blend will have a value in here that is the previously blended value, and it knows IK and FK. So if you were to actually compare these two values in example, then you will get something that will tell you, okay, it has changed from FK to IK. And same if you were to compare, these two values, it would tell you, okay, it's changed from IK to FK, or the other way around, depending how you do it. Now, that is fine, but here's the thing. The way the graph works is if this value has been changed, the change will propagate forward, but as we are monitoring at the time of change of these, the change will propagate forward in the graph evaluation, but as we are monitoring at the UI time of things, the change down here hasn't happened yet. So that blend to FK-IK comparison is just not going to be valid, basically. Now, the way you solve this, if you want to take this approach, is you either install another callback or actually you install the callback you're using on the blend value. And that makes it okay because you will basically start monitoring this one instead of that, and you will be good. There is also multiple callbacks that you can install. Not quite going to show that because it can be a bit convoluted to set up and explain. But you can install multiple callbacks that talk to each other, such as getting a dirty callback in here, so whenever this thing gets dirtied, it interacts or it helps another callback firing off here, and you compare the results. We're not going to do that. That's a bit too tricky. At the same time, I don't want to compromise the callback as we had it, partially because I want to show how to do it, and partially because it's working. It's not a bad approach. I shouldn't be giving up on a problem just because it proved a little bit tricky in one context. So what we want to do is basically fake some sort of dirty tracking on this. And dirty tracking, so if you're not familiar with the word, well, I'm sure you're familiar with the word dirty in and on its own, but in terms of graphs and valuation and stuff like that, dirty means something has changed. So this node, if you're not changing anything, this node is clean. Now, the moment you actually affect some sort of change, so you change a value, then this node has just become dirty. And all kinds of things need to happen from there, right? So as the valuation works backwards, you go, oh, okay, this node is dirty. What does a change in this node have an effect on? And it might be on these two, which means it's on these two, and then changes are propagated through the graph. So we are interested in the dirty state of this, but we're interested in which is too far down the graph for us to do everything in just the one callback here. But we're interested in doing it with something similar to a dirty callback on this. So the easy way to actually monitor change on something like this is using something like a dummy parameter. Hopefully this will keep making sense as I explain it. But the idea is we complicate our callback the tiniest bit, but not much. And what we do is we have the switch as the current value, and that is exactly what we had before. That is the same attribute we had before. On top of that, what we do is we add another parameter. So we add a dummy switch or a dirty tracker. I can't spell today apparently. And that is going to be the previous value. So what we need to happen, and then what happens is that as these change, as I move my mouse and these values are sampled, every time we do that, you basically compare these two values. So you go, okay, is the current value the same as the previous value? If it's all zeros or if it's all ones, it means nothing has changed. So this node isn't really dirty. I don't need to do anything. But the moment you are finally on this threshold, and remember, we're in the scope of the callback at this point, the previous value will be here. So the previous value will be storing that 0. And the moment you cross the threshold, again, callback space, callback scope, our actually current value is going to become 1. So finally, at that point, that check will go, okay, now the current value is 1 and the previous value is 0. So first, I save the fact that something has changed. So when those two are finally, and this is getting a bit complicated, but when those two are finally different from each other, I go, okay, now this node is dirty and I need to do something about it. So you just save yourself somewhere in a variable the fact that it's dirty. Then the next thing you need to do is, okay, I know it's dirty, I'm going to do something about it. I'm also going to clean it. So as soon as you've done that and you save that, you also set the previous value to the current value again. And hopefully this is making sense. It might not, it might be tough to follow, but in code it will become a lot easier very quickly. So that is basically the equivalent of cleaning that node and knowing, okay, so that as this moves on, as the manipulation moves on, we do something here, we have brought the previous here. So as we go through the second half of our mouse sliding, of our virtual slider, our node will result as clean because we've already operated at this point in time in the actual timeline of the callback. As usual, chat, you're my sounding board. Let me know if this makes sense. I hope it does. But I think if it doesn't just yet, it will probably be easier once we actually do it in code. So just a sec. It's really cold today in Sydney. It's been actually a pretty good week weather-wise, but yeah, last night it was 4 degrees, which by Australian standards is pretty cold. So what about it is this attribute called dirty tracker, and what you can do is call it whatever you want. You could call it, if you have more than one, if you were to do the same thing for a pedals gravity align, in case you had an offset, or for the root to end switch, you could call them by name. You could go FKIK switch dirty or something like that. Now I call it a tracker because it's not really something that's going to be saying it's dirty or not. It's actually tracking the other value. Now, let's get to actually writing some code. The way we left it was we had something like this. So this is day 14. On day 15, we're just doing theory on events and loops and stuff like that. So there's no scripts for that day. Now let's also get us, so 69, and I will change the font, don't worry. I think that script that I just pasted over must have been me testing something quickly. Doesn't matter. Oh, it's a script editor, it's not charcoal, that's why I was like, this looks terrible. Yep. So I haven't restarted charcoal. It will be okay for now. And what we do with these is we install it on the settings. So I would expect that by running these, we now would have our callback. So our issue with that now, we're in this position. So we're in FK. The idea is when you switch to IK, you want this control, which will take over for the sake of the animator not having to match them before they switch, to teleport there, right? So, and I think that, yeah, the way it works, if you have these immediate changes, is perfectly fine. Then this will be taking over. At one point they decide, okay, I'm gonna switch back to FK, so you want the FK to jump there. And I think, yeah, we did have all of these working, that's great. Now the problem we're talking about, let's make sure we show it again, is this is the case where, again, we're in FK, we want to switch to IK, and we want to do it with a virtual slider. So if I slowly scroll these, you'll see that what happened is, in between I had those false positives, and it basically, despite the fact that we're in FK and moving to IK, we hit a 0, so the callback for, okay, we're moving to FK, which means I want to match the FK to the IK and not the other way around. That's the part that we need to solve. Whoa, too much script. So, let me check the chat for a sec. We have a couple of things to do for this to work out. Now, these were the settings that we decided to monitor. Let's make sure they're fine. And we have FK rotation, IK rotation, FK control rotex, and FK rotation should be probably called FK angle because it's not really a rotation, it's a single angle. Control rotex, which I'm not even sure we are using at this point. Oh no, we are, because we're writing back to it. And remember, these are messages, so they have no effect on the graph whatsoever. We're just using them to track things. IK control translate, which is what we want to modify for the IK, and IK pedal offset. IK pedal offset. Are we using, do we even have it? So let's have a look. What were we doing with that one? Oh yes, we were using that. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Well, to me at least. That's the one that we were using for the calculations. That's the one that we're using in some of the transforms. So that's still all current, and the previous episodes show. If you don't remember these, it's just, if you're watching these on YouTube and these seem so weird, like, you can pause and go back to the previous videos and look at what those actually mean. Now, our addition to this kerfuffle as being dirty tracker, which, if I have not, and I've done it all the time, but if I've not broken my own naming conventions, it's probably going to be tempted to say it's going to be lower. It's going to be lower IK, uppercase, R, not rotation. Sorry. What am I doing here? Dirty tracker. So we want to add that as an attribute that we're actually tracking. Now, the next thing that we want to do, and I have some notes on my other screen, so I'm just making sure that I don't want to chase my tail on this one. I'd like it to be clear because I think it's an important enough explanation. So in here, what we're doing is we're iterating the keys of the dictionary we have built, and for each of these, where this is none, we're actually putting the plugin there. We need to complete these. I should have... this is painful. Let me use charcoal for this. let's make sure that it's synced over here. So yes, it is. Very good. Chris, thank you for charcoal editor. The world would be a poorer place without you. Now, and let's get a legible log. For me, like the text as it was before is fine, but I imagine that with the upscaling of the stream, it might be tough. So chat, how's the text in the editor here? Is it coming out too small possibly? I think we had moved it to 14 for the sake of people's eyesight. Okay, so we have added that dirty tracker. Now, in here, what we're doing after these populating things, we're going, okay, if it's IK, if it's FK or if it's IK, do this stuff. What we actually want to do is go, okay, before we decide to take action, is we want to know if this node is dirty. So that's just going to be a bool. And for that, we want to compare, should be settingsadders.get, and that's because we're accessing the dictionary dirty tracker. So that should be a boolean, and the way we've done this, so this get will get us the plug, then we go as boolean, that gets us the boolean value, and that should be different. Do we have, so in the callback, we are monitoring that FKIK, and that will be in plug 1. Yes, I believe so. So we should be able to straight up compare it to that. Now, and I've been writing a lot of C++ the last few days, so I was just about to actually do that line terminate. So that seems like a good idea. Now, obviously, we are not matching the attributes, so it's not going to be a reliable dirty tracker, but let's do that just for the sake of making sure that this works. So what should be, what should be happening? Right now I'm not changing the value of that dirty tracker, so it's going to be different when I switch in one direction and the same when I switch in the other. All I want to get out of this is making sure, yeah. So you can see, if you pay attention to the log, you can see that if I slowly middle mouse my way, so in one direction it's going to do nothing because we're not updating it, but in the other you can slowly go and see false, 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 true, 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 true. So this is what I was talking about. Now the next thing that we need to do is making sure that as we start, and this is something that the setup script needs to do, so whatever installs that callback needs to make sure that things match to begin with. Sorry for that, I've got a super scratchy throat. What we need to make sure is that these start from the same value. For now we're going to do it artificially. Come on, you can do it. And we're just going to go, okay, this is FK switch, this is the dirty tracker. So what we want to do is within this scope go, okay, is dirty is equal to this value. If is dirty, so if we have detected that we are in a state where this node has changed state, then we should clean the node, which means actually I want to do this because I don't like having to punch in this dictionary all the time. Dirty tracker play values, well, that should still be working just fine. So if it's dirty, then we want to clean that plug, which in our case means that dirty tracker plug dot set bool, tempted to say it's going to be, oh, come on, cold hands. So set bool to the same value of plug 1. And that means that we are cleaning. We're still not acting on it, but at least we're now tracking what's going on. So let's reinstall that, and let's actually we might actually almost be done. It's like explaining what I'm doing is taking considerably longer than actually doing it. When you have some idea of what you're doing and like literally all you're doing is switching a couple plugs, it turns out explaining things takes a lot longer than doing things. That is true for so many meetings in my life as well. So what we should actually, I do need to show you this, what we should be seeing here now is that if I switch this the way we were doing before, it's gonna say true. Because it goes like, yeah, the plug is dirty, I need to do something about it. So if I switch to 1, it's gonna say true. So that is how you would expect it to be, like it's always gonna print this. Now what is more interesting, which is the case, like this whole thing has been for the sake of fixing it, it's fine. So is what happens if we mouse slide, which is what we couldn't do before. There you go. So now you can see it's going, you know, false, 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 and that is dirty. And then it finally goes true. So you should see only one true at any given time as you slide back and forth. And if you slide fast enough, you know, you can see that you still you will still get false positives. Just these were not relevant. If you slid fast enough, you will get the same result as punching things in because the mouse wasn't being pulled frequently enough. So with a very fast slide, your polling will be here and here, or maybe just here and here, or something like that. So whenever you deal with this, and that's why I wanted to do the, you know, event loops and stuff like that, to explain how these things work, because they can be, unless you know they exist and you know what you're tracking, they can be very insidious. You might be left scratching your head on code that is perfectly fine just because you did not know the time context of what you're monitoring. So, okay, now are we practically done? So if it's dirty, we clean. If it's not dirty, then I guess we just return and we decide not to do anything else. That's probably it, isn't it? So go me, like 40 minutes of explanations, 5 minutes of work, well, 30 minutes of explanation, 8 minutes of work, and that is done. Let's see. So now, actually, sorry, I'm gonna do a super quick edit. I want something to happen, just to know I'm doing the right thing. Well, I think this is actually going to be fun, but just to show that we're doing the right thing, or to know to debug. Primitive way of debugging this, but it'll do. So I would expect this to now do nothing. If I slide very slowly, you can see it's saying not dirty, not dirty, not dirty. And we're in, this is good, so we're in IK, stay into IK. When it crosses that threshold and it goes to FK, what was happening before is it will first switch the IK over there too quickly. And then the FK will finally switch to the IK, but we're overlapping. What I expect now is that if I move very slowly, you know, you get all these not dirty, and then at some point, it should cross the threshold. There you go, it did it? So yes, it did, sorry. And it just stopped printing, obviously, so we probably should have printed in both cases. But you can see that now we are in FK, and the FK is correctly switched to the IK when we wanted it to. Now, the idea is the FK is in control now. Let's test both ways. We can remove this silly thing. And we reinstall our callbacks. Again, if you don't remember what this is like, previous videos, I think we went over these in enough detail. When I do callback setups like these, I like to have something that always removes and always reinstalls the callback. It turns out it's pretty good to do quick dirty work like this. So now I would expect that this being in FK, if I very slowly move towards IK, and it should, yeah, nothing should happen for a little bit, and this stuff to go up. I should probably put a mouse cam or something, I don't know. But then finally, when it reaches the IK point, the IK moves there before taking over. Alright, so 30 minutes of explanation to add 5 lines of code. Yes, that is often the case when you explain things, but so here's some food for thought. I know some nervous coders that will write a ton of lines, and there's a place and a time for nervous coding where you just punch out a lot of lines, especially if you're very comfortable with what you're doing and you're exploring fast and all of that. And there is a time for looking at your code and adding 1 line every 5 minutes. So that is our callback, isn't it? This is, yep, this is good. So without me even noticing, the other thing we have done is we have completely defactored all the functions. So we had some functions that we were relying on before, like a few days, a few streams ago. Sorry. And I was saying, look, they might be out of scope once this is installed and all of that, so you want to defactor them, which means you will bring them in the main body of this callback. I think we've done that already quite naturally at one point. This is not horrible code. It does what it's supposed to do. So we'll call it a win. String not over yet. And these are things that we just use to iterate the selection and remove callbacks from selection, whatever, that's fine. We don't need this to be in the callback itself. So, chat, do we have any questions or things that we want to look at before I move on? And if we don't have any, then what we might do is actually turn this into a script node so that this thing happens on load. And I don't need to save because I haven't really modified the scene. The callback itself doesn't modify the scene. I don't trust code that works, but it's it's like what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines there, 7 lines. 7 lines added in 45 minutes. That's, yeah, it's 5 minutes a line. It's not bad timing. I've had worse days than this. So I reckon this doesn't need any further work. This is good as is because it's syncing. So we should move on to a new yeah, we should move on to the actual payload for the script node. So I don't think we'll quite get around. Yeah, sure, add it to Git. Now, let's move these to our library of thingies. So this is gonna be what we want the script node to run every time we open this scene. And we don't have a ton of time. I would like to get started on this. I don't think we're gonna be able to quite finish it. But if you watching these on YouTube, this is a good time. If you don't remember what we're talking about, this is a good time to pause and go back and watch the last probably couple streams where we discuss script nodes. But script nodes, which are pretty trivial to add, are and it just goes script type wise, are these things that you can have in a scene that, unlike callbacks, will actually persist with the scene. And you use these to track events such as open close, so that if you run open close after and you put a payload in there, it will run that script when you open that scene. So we want to add a script in here that will install this callback for me every time that scene is open. So, and it's gonna be a massive string basically. Now, the body of the callback is fine. Since the scene will have been freshly opened, we don't need remove callbacks. So we are gonna lead with these. We will need the imports, which I don't have in here. So there's abundant use of OM2, which means from Maya.api import. So do we use anything else? I think we might have had something like sign, yeah, math. So we also want to import math. And this is the Python standard library math. I will be glad when this scratchy frog will be gone. Chat is not bad, like there's a few people on, but it's super quiet. So I imagine this is blindingly clear and everybody's in awe of the one line every 5 minutes calling rate we have. So we do want something that installs the callback, which is gonna be this bit. I don't feel the need to factor these into a function at this point, but it means, so this is going to be the read control panel. This variable doesn't exist, so it means that we need to find it. Now, we could do something super horrible because we're in, so this is not really this is not really a great example of pipelining. We're literally looking at opening a scene. So if you were to import and respace nodes and stuff like that, preventing name clashes, like this would be too primitive. But in this case, I think we can get away with being super lazy. So I would say I want to encode the full path to this, and that should be good enough for when we just open the scene. So what we have here is the path for that will be unicycle. Oh, can I? No, I can't. Sure. I will use a script editor for this. Overkill much. Just text. It's another thing that Charcoal has that the Maya one doesn't. Sometimes you just want text. Sometimes text is just text. So unicycle, the pipe means next object in a hierarchy, so we're encoding a DAG path. We would have pedals and component. Now, because there's only one of these, because of how we're encoding the name of the component in here, you could probably get away with just this name and it will be unambiguous, but you never know. So if you add things to this scene and something else like a duplicate of this called unicycle2 contains the same object, having just the name of this becomes ambiguous. We want it to be unambiguous, and we're working with a hard scene, so we're going to encode the full path. So the next item is control, and we have pedals and settings control. At this point, I was typing before because I couldn't comfortably copy and paste. I could have just copy and pasted this, but yeah, whatever. Tell you what, actually, let us also do that. So from Maya.api, import OpenMaya.2. So this will be setting stack path is this. So here's the thing: if you want to find things by name in through OpenMaya 2, because if you use commands, that would be pretty trivial. You should be able to just do commands.select or whatever. But if you sorry, I'll take that back. I might not want to go there just yet. No, I'm not gonna go there. So scrap that. Not gonna go over selections and selection manipulation in OM2, but we do want to talk DAG path, I guess. So, and if you're unfamiliar with, like, if you're not strong in Python, you might not be familiar with static methods. So sure, let's actually do that. So what is it? MFN DAG path that we're after, I think, the functor for DAG path. It should be just DAG path. Seriously, I just want programming guide, Python 2 reference, not the guide. There you go. Okay, hopefully this is readable. So mDAG path class reference, wherever this might be in the grand scheme of things. For some reason it's stuck to these as I did before. mDAG path, there you go. So from these you can tell that, you know, if you look at the _1s, you can tell what it supports in terms of Pythonic types, which is length, iterator. You would have to test with these things, so maybe the iterator will go over the tokens, or it might go letter by letter. Not equal, so that you can compare to DAG paths, supports being encoded as a string. Now what we're interested in is a static method, and basically, and these often throw people off. You have, and it's telling you static public member functions. When you have an object, let's use charcoal. When you have an object for something, so let's say I have my DAG path, and that's equals, you know, on2.mDAG path, and I have an M object here that I initialized it to, then this is a fully formed class. And that means that you can now work on it. And you can do whatever methods you have in here. Length, node, whatever. And you're fine. Now, if something is a static method, it means it doesn't require that you have initialized the class. It only requires the base class. So when you see something is static, and this is pretty useful, you can do get a path too, and it'll tell you. I think it takes a string. It tries to specify some path. Oh, that's. I want to get a path too. There you go. It requires an M object, so that's good. See, that's the thing. I don't need a lot of this stuff. I'm kind of chasing my tail on this. So somebody in chat might know off the top of their head. Can you construct a DAG path from a string? Should we just try that? Let's try it. So it's a setting string path. We don't. Anyway, this is the part that I probably should have rehearsed. I don't remember if you can construct one from a string or not like that. I'm also need no matching constructor found, so you cannot. Okay, we're back to showing so the DAGPath part is kind of a dead end at this point. I'm sorry, we are back to the selection part of it. Now, if you want to get an M object for something by name for a circuitous or two-way, you can. And the way you do it is through selection. So you go cell equals onto, what is it, M selection list, and you can actually initialize it with a string right away. Setting strings path. It might take a list of strings to initialize. Oops, fine. No matching constructor, so that's fine. So we get an empty selection list, and then inside selection you can add things by string. So this should work. Now that selection will have, if it finds that thing, it will have the M object for it in it. Now if I were to add something that doesn't exist, I believe that would actually error. So I don't think we have any object called full. I'm sorry for the DAGPath tangent. It's like, yeah, I mean, you need to know how DAGPaths work and all of that. Yeah, so the object does not exist. So that's what we expect. That means that we want to go setting strings path. This is a runtime error. So we want to catch that in case, I mean, we know that we're saving the script node with the scene. So we know it should never fail, but whatever. We want to set specifically for a runtime error. Now, if we want the M object, which is what we're interested in for that selection, so I'm just saving myself something to say, yeah, I found the object, and then we can move on. If found, then I don't want to nest everything in the try. I just don't like that kind of thing. Now, if found, we want to find the actual M object for that, and there's only going to be one item in the selection, so we know that our settings mob is cell.getDependNode0. So, and this is, let's have a look. Yeah, we can do super quick, like boarding thingy. So the selection in Maya is actually a collection of items, and it's ordered. And this is one of the things that Maya doesn't have a lot of these. You have an object array, which is returned by some methods, by some it isn't, but it can be kind of tough to deal with, whereas a selection is a pretty comfortable way to just go, okay, it's not necessarily what is selected in Maya. So it is the mechanism that Maya uses to track selection in many regards, at least as far as you're concerned. So when you go mglobal.getActive selection, it returns you these. And it can contain, it's one of the few things that can actually contain M objects. And so it's a pretty good way, and because it can be added to by string, so you can give it a string, and if that string represents a valid object or a valid DAGPath, it will actually do string and fetch you the M object for that and store the actual M object. And it might seem convoluted, it might seem slow, it's actually one of the faster ways to manipulate a lot of things by name. So we do have the node, and that's pretty much all we needed to do. It's that kind of day where, like, looking for the things that I want to explain and stuff like that, and explaining them is taking me a lot longer than actually writing the code. So do we need anything else? No, we don't. So let's go. So if we found that object, let us also get remove callbacks for node. Why not? It's no reason not to. There we go. Remove callbacks from node. Settings mob. Whoops. Then we want to install this callback for sure. So let us also get that. And at this point, I'm doing the work that I was doing. That I was doing in. I can do it in PyCharm. So get the settings, dummy selection, add the settings to get the M object, remove the callbacks from it, and lastly we want to install that callback. It's better to try accept the add of the string into the selection or use command object exists before. Yeah, that's a good question. I normally use obj exists before adding it. It depends. It depends on, like, I've done it the way I've just shown it, because that's the way some wrapper methods could get implemented, but obj exists is actually really fast. I don't know if I mentioned it before, I might have, but that's a good point actually. So, and what I would say, if you're just trying to do something inline like we're doing here, that is a very good point. Use obj exist. So obj exist, for those who are not familiar with it, it's a query only command, which means it's armless. It's very fast because I suspect that it actually simply hashes the string and then checks it against the hash table or something like that. And if that doesn't make sense, don't worry, you don't really need to know what that means, but the part where it's fast you're interested in. So we will do something like this. So these will go out. And so in theory this should actually work. Like right now we should have a callback installed. I think so. We can test quickly enough because I don't think I've removed. Yeah, so our callback is still working. Now this subset of the script, let me run the imports first, should actually just settings mob, remove callback from nodes. So let's also store this. If you don't know it, Maya has a persistent Python interpreter, so you can run subsets of your script before you run the law, and those will be available to subsequent runs. So I can just run the imports and run that from the selections, and they're just going to be stashed there in my interpreter for me, and these should now run. So I might also want the log for that, but yeah. And you can tell here, you know, okay, I've run this part first, and then I've run that part, and all of that. So now the callback should be gone, and it's I probably should turn off the hierarchy selection stuff, because this must be incredibly hard to read. But we have the FK here, we have the AK here. I would expect that this does nothing now other than switching. Yeah, it doesn't move the AK-FK controls, it only switches the actual graph level as we would expect. So that is good. Thank you, Sentinel, for the note. It's good to know both things, but yeah, try except in Python. The try doesn't really cost you anything. Well, it has a negligible cost by Python's lowness standards anyway. The except costs you, so I don't recommend you use try except as a flow control system. Treat it as an actual exceptions, as in something exceptional has happened, but I want to handle it, kind of thing. Don't use it liberally where it will accept half of the time. That will be slow. But also don't underuse it, as in don't think that the try costs too much. The try doesn't, like if the try succeeds, it's hardly any cost at all. Now, remove callback, set attribute, change callback. I think this is the lot of it, tempted to say, and unlike the one before, this should work without a selection. So, because it's basically what we're doing before, it's just, it's got a hard-coded something here. Settings mob. I think we also had, not super fond of this. Where are we using it? So yes, we also have these hard-coded thingy here, and these merits defactoring. So it's only using here anyway. Could make it a constant or whatever, but it doesn't matter. This is only, like, this is a callback that is pretty lightweight anyway. So we're still running the removal callbacks now. That should have restored their functionality. Yep, so the FK just switched there. Let's be scrupulous and let's run it the other way as well. I will now expect the IK to switch over there. Yep, also good. Really? Code that kind of works. I don't like this. I don't trust it. I think we're fine. No, we're not. Seriously? So this is probably persisting from somewhere else. So, see, that's why I don't trust code that works. I don't want to lengthen the stream unnecessarily, but run new scenes and stuff like that. Make sure you have fresh interpreters before you actually deploy code. Yep. So we switched to FK, and the FK has jumped. Alright, only one way to know, which is, and this is work the other way around. So this is not correct. That's the other thing I like about IDEs. I know a lot of people think they're not lead enough. I'm too stupid to not have the IDE help me finding issues. As for these, it just cannot find reference. Yeah, you don't really need to worry over much about it, but if you want a way to fix it, what is it? No, sorry, not that. 1-2 stays. There's actually stubs that you can fish from, and these will actually work in mine as well. This is, it's telling you it's a protected member and don't worry about it. But if you import the stubs, if you import these, it basically gives you, don't modify it, don't go and alter that, otherwise you're going to break up the bindings pretty badly. But what this is doing is basically looking up all the stubs that are inside OM2 that actually give you a lot of stuff like auto-completion and things like that. It will work just fine inside Maya as well, but inside Maya, especially if you have charcoal, it will auto-complete OpenMaya just fine. And it will spare you from these undefined errors, undefined token or whatever errors. Now, can that really be it? It looks like it is it. So we do have, and we've called these payload. Yeah, too good to be true, but This is a terrible name. I don't suggest you name things like this. I just want it to be bleeding obvious. So, something I always forget about because I hate that editor with the passion of a million burning suns is normally I just set this stuff through scripts or custom UIs or things like that. But somebody was reminding me that you can actually use the, what is it, animation editors for the expression editor, that you should be able to edit scripts from here. Now, selected object and attribute, default object, yeah, I don't care about that. Editor, text editor. I so do not trust this thing. This is where I clearly do not know what I'm doing. So, like, personally, it's telling me create. I have no idea what I'm doing. On-see load callback text. Sure, whatever. Attribute not found. So it's opening a transient editor. It's not terrible. Not hating that. Whatever, but yeah, it's not. So anybody in chat actually knows how one is supposed to get these? I think it has in expression mode, not scripted editor mode. It's very possible, as I said, you know, select filter by script no name, don't care. Creating expression. I thought I'd done it by object attribute, script no name. Ah, thank you. Whatever. Thank you very much. I was convinced I did it, but I hadn't. I just changed it to be by object attribute name, which is silly. So, edit, delete, reload. Is it actually done? Yeah, if you click edit, you'll put it in there. All right. Thank you, Ryan. See, when it comes to Maya's default UIs, do not ever trust anything I say. Now, will this blend? We'll see. So sorry, what I've done is actually I just saved it with the script node, which I do expect to fire off when I open the scene, and install my callback. I do have no errors here. I could have actually put a print of sorts in there, which probably would have been a good idea. So I will now expect to, well, I should have my script node somewhere. Apparently that did not get saved. I on-see load install, yeah, I should have given it a better name, shouldn't I? So now, that does have a string. It is on open close. Oh, it's before. I wanted it after. What the hell is wrong with you? I must have misconfigured that thing, whatever it is that I was using. So these, let's see if it does anything. Yeah, it does actually. So it doesn't matter whether you do before or after first scene open, I guess, or at least it doesn't in this case. So, alright. Bang on 1 hour and 50 minutes. I swear I did not rehearse any of these. I don't know how we actually got everything done in exactly the time allotted. Let's take graces where and when they come. This is fine, and we saved the scene, and it works, and that's it. So we got a working callback, and it will work when you open the scene. I would suggest that maybe you add it to the after scene opens. Do we have any questions or comments or things that anybody wants to go over? Is this all clear? Do people know about it? I think quite a few people that are in chat right now know about it. The irony of it is that most of the people that follow the stream are actually competent far beyond what we're streaming, and yet they come on. Alright, I am gonna close it in like a minute unless questions or anything interesting comes up. What happens, so there is a question which is, what happens when you import reference the scene and there are namespaces on the settings string path. So namespaces you have to manage if they're variant. So if you just opening the scene and you're opening a scene that contains namespaces, they will come in with the rest. And that's just fine, obviously enough. Now, if you import things and you import them in a different space, that is a little bit tricky. So there's two things you can do. And for people that do not know, namespaces in Maya literally do nothing other than altering the name of an object. They don't they don't do anything glorious. So if I were to namespace this object, so oh, come on. For those unfamiliar with it, won't take very long to show. I could do test namespace, add the selected object. Now, this callback, as it is right now, it just won't work. I have an unrelated question that you can answer off stream. Well, ask it away. It might be interesting enough anyway. So, sorry, these will just not work anymore, right? So if you do that, it will tell you false. Now, if you're willing to risk ambiguity, normally you need a bit of a pipeline to feed into these things. You can actually, and if you know the scope of the namespace, you could do a search. If you knew that the whole object will get namespace, you could do a search and replace for each pipe and replace that pipe with, pipe colon the namespace you imported. So you will need some work in those regards. That's basically what pipelining is largely about, right? It's the specific context of how you manipulate things that would otherwise break Maya, and you enrich the tools or the processing a little bit. Most of the time it will be as simple as that. If you are willing to risk ambiguity, again, maybe you're in a commercial, you don't have a lot of shots, it's unlikely that you get a ton of shots added or taken away, you could make the path catch-all. So for something dumb like we've done here, let's say you namespace only partially, or you bring things in as a reference namespace and then you parent them to something else, then you will probably do something like this, and this I would expect to resolve, yeah. Because you're telling it, look, this is going to be namespace, and this is going to be, whatever. Any namespace is in column, by the way, Maya always has a namespace, it just hides it from you for anything but the word transform object. So this should also find it, and this will find it whatever namespace it's been brought in as. If you also rename the object or putting under an odd DAG hierarchy or something like that, also possibly fine. But then you start getting into that kind of cycle of when is this too much, when is it too hacky, when is it sufficient. If you had something like this, honestly, I would not do something like this. If you have a lot of references, importing as and stuff like that, I would expect that you will wrap your referencing and importing so that you can run something pre. So you don't just run a plain import, you go import as with your own command. And I would expect to find something like every new scene, a tracker object, and when you import, you have a predetermined object inside your rigs that is going to get connected to tracked objects, and you do a little bit of scanning and stuff like that. And that way you can embed that scanning in your callbacks or in your script nodes. It's literally pipelining, and there's a million and one ways to go about it, and just about all of them are, have trade-offs. So yeah, it's not a strictly stream subject related question, but I think it's a good question because it's been asked a few times. Like people, so it's Kat asking, I won't be able to attend tomorrow's stream, and I'm just wondering if there is a way you all keep in touch. Is it just Twitter or forums, a Kriva community to talk to, bounce ideas off of, ask advice? I've been asked if I would put something like a Discord up for Cult of Rig, or forums or anything like that. So I have done forums. I've moderated some of the largest CG forums ever for like literally like over a decade for CG Talk, like well over a decade. Others before. It's a lot of work, and unless you get a strong initial momentum, they just die. So it's work that I can't do. And I don't want to start something that dies, because the thing is, when you start a community and it doesn't take off, you don't get to reboot it. I have a fair chunk of experience with these things, and it's like, if there is one thing I've learned, is like, don't start a community unless you're ready to tend to it and cater to it and make sure that it's healthy. With that said, I'm definitely not opposed to having a Discord server. Like if this, if we do season 1, it really takes off and things get busy, I will consider it. Do bear in mind though that right now there's already enough fragmentation as is. So you have tech artists and you have several private Slack chats. There are less private Slack chats. There's Stephanie, a fairly famous entrepreneur programmer, is open graphics programming. Twitter is kind of okay, but like an example, like you find that people that have a lot of followers who use Twitter specifically, like the latter in my case, like I try to keep it to strictly code to freak stuff, or just things that are extremely funny or extremely principled. So, long story short, I know how you feel, and hopefully you get an invite to some of the private communities for now. Tech Artist is pretty good. CG Talk, well, I've left the moderation team for several reasons. So we do have Brad in chat. Does Rigging Dojo have an open community as well? I'm not affiliated to Rigging Dojo, and it's I honestly like the guys. So if they have something that's open, that's probably a good way. Like at least the people that are in chat right now, the usual suspects in chat, they all know RD. So yeah. Anyway, that's becoming rambling. But yeah, look, we might be able to do stuff in the future, and I know exactly how you feel. But for now, nothing that is called the freak specific yet. Facebook. Somebody's saying Facebook. I hate Facebook. You will never see me on Facebook. Anyway, there don't seem to be any more stream related questions, so I will shut this down in 10 seconds. Thanks everybody for attending, and thanks everybody for watching, and that seems like it. Yeah, I agree. I don't let professional interactions within 10 parsecs of my Facebook. Yep. Alright, thanks everybody, have a good day, and if you follow the stream, I'll see you tomorrow. If not, you'll catch you whenever this stuff comes online on YouTube.